In addition to just creating regular old text or even just basic text on a path, you can also take text one step further inside of GIMP by converting text into a path and then using that path to perform different transformations on the text to create perspective or any number of different effects you might want to apply to it. You can then take that path and stroke it or fill it with a color, and therefore making it look as if you've created some really interesting text when in fact you've done nothing more than manipulate a path. So in this movie, I'm going to show you how to convert text into a path, and then I'll show you a quick method for transforming that path into perspective to give it a little bit more depth. So let's go up to the File menu and just create a brand new file. And in this case, I'm going to pick something like 800 by 600, and I'll click OK. And once I create this new document, I'm just going to grab the text tool, and I'll click to draw out a box. And I'm just going to type out the word path. I'll select that text, and let's blow it up quite a bit. Something like 160 ought to do the trick. And so once I have that text in place, really doesn't matter what it looks like or anything else. I just have this now. And I'll grab the Move tool and position it somewhere close to the center. And once I do that, I'm ready to start converting this into a path. And that's very easy to do. All you have to do is grab your text tool, select the text all the way across, right-click, and then choose Path from Text. When I do that, you're not going to see anything happen on screen necessarily. If I switch to the Move tool now, you're not going to see anything. But if I go over here in my Layers panel and click up here at the top where it says Paths, you will see a new path right there. It is hidden currently. If I turn on the visibility, you'll see the outline pop up around the text you have already. I'll go over to my Layers panel and temporarily turn off the text layer, and now you can see that path exists right there in the middle. I can even go as far as to throw this text layer away. The path still exists on its own, and I'm able to work with it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transform this path to be a little bit more in perspective. And so I'm going to grab the perspective tool. And one of the things that's interesting about all of the tools, whether it be the scale, rotate, shear, move, whatever tool it might be, you can actually target different objects in the tool options. So by default, in the transform section, you'll notice that it has this button selected where you're working with the layer. And if I were to use the perspective tool on the layer, it would actually just change the background and the path would remain as it is. I could also switch it to selection if I had an active selection on screen. I don't currently, so I'm just going to select path. Once I have path selected, watch what happens when I come out here on the canvas. I can click, and once I click, it automatically brings up a perspective grid. I can then use this grid to transform the text back and forth, just like that, changing the perspective. So you could place this on the side of a building, or any number of things that you wanted to do. So let's just send this back a little bit. Something like that. And once I click transform, look what happens. The text is now kind of off in space, like it's floating away. And so now what I could do is go over to my Paths panel, and inside of the Paths panel, you have several different options. You could say that you want to convert this path to a selection. And once you do that, it creates its dancing selection around the path. Now I'll temporarily hide the path. Come back over into my Layers panel, and I'll create a brand new layer, and I'll just call this Path Text, and hit OK. Still have my active selection, and now what I can do is grab my Paint Bucket tool over in the toolbar, select a color, let's say I want red, hit OK, and now I just come out and click inside the active selection, and now my text is filled with that. Select and choose None, and there you go. Now, one of the good things about this is because you made your selection from a path is made of vectors, you're going to get much cleaner lines than if you just converted your text to a selection before, or if you had just turned your text into a layer, which is possible by right-clicking on any text layer and converting it to a layer, because this way it allows you to actually base this filled section that you have here off of a vector object. This is not vector art, so it cannot be scaled infinitely without penalty. So you want to make sure you get your size and shape right off the bat. But in general, it's a very good way of creating some interesting text effects simply by converting the text first to a path, manipulating the path, and then coming back, converting that into a selection and then a layer, and then filling it with a color, or you could even stroke it with a brush or a color to create some really interesting effects. So, I hope by now you have a better understanding of why you would want to convert text into paths, and also that you have a good understanding of how to do that here inside of GIMP. And then once you have done that, hopefully I've given you a good idea of where to take that to expand your creativity even further.